And so I think life came knocking and through a series of kind of discontent. And I think that's where the permission doesn't come in. It comes knocking for you sometimes. Went out to this nightclub in Cleveland called the Groovy Little Nightclub and discovered house music, progressive house music. And at the time it was very underground, but I remember like feeling that this is amazing. And I would go out dancing and just like let the grief go and feel something different. Just love it. Love that it's back in my life. And I make really long mixes every week. Something I do for me and something that really helps reduce anxiety and increase creativity. And I think honestly, it makes my work better in multifamily because I show up in a really creative way. Today's day one. You have to start somewhere. And first things first, you need to get really clear about what you want in your life and then start to document that in your life and put a plan together that focuses on it. Without a plan, nothing's going to happen. You need to look at your talent attraction and retention strategies. If you're not making that a priority as a portfolio company that manages properties, you're bleeding. Everybody's chasing the next, couple grand or $5,000 at the next company. It's a revolving door. You're not solving anything.
And they sign a contract, and then everything's being pushed down to the site teams with no buy-in, with no feedback. It's just that we're going to do this going forward. What it ends up happening not too long down the road is very low adoption rates. People actually hating their life because this is not a isolated occurrence. It happens over and over and over and over again. We're actually rolling already.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about something that I've seen in your 2024 rewind. You mentioned there that transformation doesn't require permission. That caught my attention. What inspired this perspective, this bold perspective, and how did it shape your decision to leave RealPage and launch your own consulting firm?
So I think the permission part comes in that sometimes I think life gives you signals. And about, oh man, almost 2 years ago now, I was really questioning my life. And I don't call it like a midlife crisis or anything. I think, life reflection happens with all of us in many phases, but this particular phase was I was feeling unfulfilled and I was missing music in my life. And, I had a really great job at RealPage and I love my clients. I really loved being in strategic accounts at RealPage. But I just felt like I was investing, 50, 60 hours a week on them and was questioning if I could find another way in my life to have more room for music again in it. So I was working with a coach, James Hilliard, and really working on clarity for my life and really mapping out what would give me meaning in this next phase of life. I would say my daughter graduating from high school is part of that whole canvas of going, okay, now the time. When isn't the time? And so I think life came knocking and through a series of kind of discontent. And I think that's where the permission doesn't come in. It comes knocking for you sometimes, but you have to actually choose to answer. And it took me about 6 months of a lot of soul searching, honestly, a lot of angst to make the decision to leave RealPage, go and launch my own consulting company, and actually start making music again. And I had taken a break from music for over a decade, long time. So that's what I meant by that. It was really a hard decision, and then it became a really easy decision once I made it.
A lot to unpack here. What was the moment that you would say that, like kind of trigger you questioning, what's like, is there any meaning here in it for me, or I'm just like, going through the motions? Was it an event, a particular event? Besides like the big picture that you just share, was it something in particular that kind of like made you say, okay?
There were a series of signals. I was starting to have high blood pressure, thyroid problems, had personally gained a lot of weight. Like there were all these different things that were starting to pile up. And I would always be like, oh, I'm just busy, or oh, I'm just stressed, or oh, I'm just this. I went to a sales kickoff at RealPage last February, and they took a photo of me for headshots. And I remember looking at it and going, who is this woman? I don't recognize her anymore. And that for me was like, you can stay and do this in your life, and that's fine. That path's fine, but is there something more? And I remember putting that on my desktop to look at, and go, I think there's room here to make some drastic changes. It's not going to be easy, and it wasn't. It took a lot to untangle it. I'm a single parent, so there've always been these kind of fears around leaving the comfort of corporate America for me. I've always been an employee, and I think a good one, a good value provider. So it took a lot of reflection, even on my own self worth and my own trust in myself at the time, to really be like, can you take this risk and actually get out there and start to do something different and provide value? Do you believe in yourself? So it's a whole lot. Hopefully, I didn't share too much, but that was definitely an aha moment for me.
It feels to me like you're narrating my story. Uh, and then although like the timeline doesn't 100% match, there are certain things that I identify myself with. Like asking this, what do I want? For me was legacy. Like
Yeah,
what do I want to be remembered for? I've always been an employee, and I've been asked by friends and relatives numerous times, why won't you go to work for yourself? Like they saw certain things that I haven't. See, I
yeah,
wasn't seeing it myself. And my answer was always, without hesitation, like I don't, I don't want to take this route. I want to do what I do, what I'm good at, and as an employee, and just kind of do my job, and whatever time I have left, dedicate to other hobbies or passions of mine.
yeah,
And then things have changed, right? Things have changed. Same thing, this is something that I'm actually dealing with as we speak. The weight, gaining a lot of weight, and just not being healthy,
yeah,
really.
yeah,
And now I'm the same way you just kind of put that picture in front of you so you could look at it all the time. I always think, I have a son. He's not out of high school yet. He's in 11th grade. I'm mainly thinking him, right? If I can improve myself for him, that's very selfish. And then literally every day when I have to, make decisions about, my diet and everything, I have
yeah.
to, like, really think, like, do I really need to do this? Do I really need to eat this? And I think that as long as I could keep that awareness alive out there and question myself, I could put myself to shame, right? By just saying, no, no, I'm just gonna make the wrong choice when it comes to this, when it comes to diet. Of course, it's not perfect, not nearly perfect, but I'm making better decisions now that I'm just kind of like having that, like you said, picture. I so much identify, and I'm sure that for those in the audience, for those that will be watching the recording, a lot of them will resonate with.
I was going to say too, the why is our family and our legacy. My daughter, she's a big mirror and she watches me, and I think the biggest compliment I got along the way was her noticing a difference. She's like, "You seem less stressed. You seem happier." And I'm showing her that that's possible for her in her life, and I think that is so important. So, thank you for sharing your story as well.
We're role models. Sometimes, very intentionally, sometimes, by default, because we're parents. So it's very important the type of role models we become. So there's always, that awareness out there, and you want it to be a good one. You want it to be a positive role model. I remember our first conversation, and this was less than 2 months ago.
Yeah.
You share with me, and you also mentioned in your introduction, you mentioned your passion for music, and I can't even tell you on how many levels I resonate with music and with the specific music that you are making. So I would love for you to share some things here, to share what happened like up until 10 years ago. Why did you stop? And then I like to get deeper into the type of music too.
Oh my gosh. I actually, back in 1999, I had a son who passed away from a long illness. He passed away before his fifth birthday. And part of my grieving process, I went out to this nightclub in Cleveland called the Groovy Little Nightclub and discovered house music, progressive house music. And at the time, it was very underground. But I remember like feeling that this is amazing. And I would go out dancing and just like let the grief go and feel something different. And at the time, I'm classically trained pianist and also used to sing a lot. I'm like, I think I can learn how to do this. And I went and bought two turntables and a mixer and was up in my loft for months just trying to make it work. Ended up learning how to beat, match, and make mixes on vinyl at the time because this was back in 2000, and then started getting gigs and getting booked, and then started traveling and did that up until 2006 when my daughter was born. Really loved it. Never left multifamily and real estate. I always had my job there, but really music was like that outlet. So I've always stayed with it, even though I've been raising my daughter, making mixes at home, just for me and listening to a lot of music. I'm an avid collector, but always wanted to learn how to produce, and I never did, and just really never saw a way to do it. And part of working on this clarity was I wanted to invest in learning how to produce. And so I ended up hiring a music production coach and getting the right equipment. And I've got 13 songs out now, and I've got my first solo EP coming out into this month, and then another five that are signed already coming out February to April. So just love it. Love that it's back in my life. And I make really long mixes every week and put those out on SoundCloud and Mixcloud and Spotify and Apple now. So something I do for me and something that really helps reduce anxiety and increase creativity. And I think honestly, it makes my work better in multifamily because I show up in a really creative way. It was a mouthful.
For those that are passionate about this type of music, house music, how could they find you on SoundCloud?
So on SoundCloud, I'm under Shell Robinson. So I just removed the EY as my artist name. You can find me that way on Spotify, Apple, Mixcloud as well, even YouTube.
There's another commonality right there that kicks in. So this was 2016. 2016, I had a situation. I had like serious back problems, and I was on the verge of like ending up in a wheelchair if I wasn't making
Oh, wow.
drastic changes for me, for myself. At the same time, I was connected on Facebook with a younger generation individuals that graduated the same high school that I did, and in my Facebook feed there were always different songs that they like, right? Obviously, different generation than I am. I wasn't exposed at the time to any like house or trance music. And one of the artists, a young lady, was always posting songs from was Armin van Buuren.
Oh, yeah.
So I gave it a shot, and I listened to a couple of songs, and the trance music was part of why I came back.
That's so
And I'm not exaggerating when I'm saying
no.
this. The energy that I've gotten from trance music helped me overcome my back problems, my issues, my being overweight. I lost about like in a period of probably like 6 to 9 months. I lost 40 to 50 pounds.
Wow.
Got back in shape. Never felt in my adult years better. Changed my diet. Changed my habits. Starting exercising. So I think music has something that's so very special about it that could actually change lives. And I'm very fascinated about what you share because I'm so much finding myself like my story in your story.
Yeah.
So
Music heals.
so when you first started, you started this as a hobby, right? So you were having a full-time job and at the
Yeah.
same time doing gigs.
Oh,
Wow.
yeah. Yeah.
For how
I
long?
would.
For how many years?
So for almost 6 years, and there was one point that I was traveling 3 days a week. I was a director of marketing for national church residences, and I would travel 3 days a week for them, and then I'd get home on Thursday night and then fly out again on Friday afternoon for shows all weekend. In fact, the first time I visited San Francisco before I moved out here, I actually played in San Francisco, and that was actually my introduction to where I've lived for the last 21 years now. So great city for music.
What made you stop for such a long time?
I think at the time, my daughter's father was in a startup here in Silicon Valley, and we worked really hard on that startup for him to get funding and get that off the ground. And I really wanted to be a great mom to my daughter. And, it kind of goes back to the safety of corporate America at the time felt safer and felt like that was the way to go to be a good mom for her. And so I made a commitment that I was going to let the music go and be a great mom and be in her life and show up for, every recital, every dance class, every event in her life and do that. And I think I've done a good job as a mom with her. I think she would say that. I hope so.
How did it feel when you came back to music?
Oh my gosh. I really approached it as a hobby. And if I only learned how to produce for me and nothing ever came from it and I never got published, I was going to be happy because it just makes me happy. The rest is a bonus. The fact that I'm now getting signed is it's a huge bonus and a happy surprise. So I get emotional about it. I'm incredibly grateful and thankful that I have both sides of me being nurtured at this point in my life. It feels like a huge blessing.
You're just another example of, that saying that do what you love. You're never gonna have to, work yourself a day in your life.
I do. I love both. I love music and I love multifamily. I really do. It's a good industry. It's been good to me.
There's many out there that are watching this conversation, and I think they had amazing careers, but at the same time, corporate life, they're feeling stuck. What advice would you give to someone that's kind of like considering they're entertaining the idea of leaving the corporate world, but they're not quite sure, they're hesitant, that they're like in between? What would you tell them in order to help them make that, take that leap?
I think first things first is it feels insurmountable and you have to reframe that that's reasonable. It is surmountable at the insurmountable at the moment. Second, I would say you need to get a support system around you and look at your network. And if you need to, work either with a therapist or with a coach to really craft out a plan for your life and what works for you. And making big changes, you got to start small. To me, I kind of look back over the last 18 months, and it was a progression of small decisions to get to a bigger decision. It took financial planning. It isn't a small undertaking, but it is possible if you start to work on small decisions. It's kind of like when you wake up and decide today you're going to go to do that workout or you're going to go do that walk. Today's day one. You have to start somewhere. And first things first, you need to get really clear about what you want in your life and then start to document that in your life and put a plan together that focuses on it. Without a plan, nothing's going to happen.
So you planned ahead. When you quit your corporate jobs, did you quit cold turkey, or was it like, where you were doing certain gigs, like certain consulting things on the side while you were still full time employed?
No, so I took a break, purposeful break. I feel fortunate that I got it. My daughter and I made a decision to mark the moment and take a long road trip together. She was graduating from high school. I was leaving RealPage, so we took a break and did a road trip across the United States up to the Upper Peninsula, and then kind of came back through Denver and Zion and Chicago, and we just had a great time together. And then I spent 90 days knowing I wanted to kind of go out on my own, but then putting it in motion. So part of that was rest. Part of that was daily restorative meditations, aka naps, to really start to get myself back in a good place. And then really kind of starting to map out what I wanted to do, developing a menu of offerings, developing like the ideal client that I want to work with. And then I started to make sure my content matched all of that on LinkedIn as a thoughtful strategic plan. I actually gave myself time. In the plan, I thought I wouldn't launch until this year. And I was really fortunate to pick up my first client as of November 1st. So I'm incredibly grateful that I was able to secure an engagement sooner than I thought. I feel very, very blessed about that as well.
What would you say was the most challenging part of this transition for you, from from the full time corporate job to starting everything, rebuilding it from zero, and most likely in pieces, right? Versus like, I'm talking about the income part, right? Where that you're making what you're making, it's a good salary, and then when you start working as a consultant, you're gonna make that art pieces, or hopefully more than that. But you start with pieces. You don't typically, your first client doesn't replace 100% of your income from your previous job.
Right. I would say you have to be committed to digging into your savings a bit, and that was a difficult decision. You need to get comfortable with the unknown, that it's all not mapped out. For me, that was really difficult, and some days it still is. You have to trust yourself, and that to me is a daily exercise. That is something I've had to work on and grow in my life a lot, is that self-trust. And that part, I think, has been the most difficult part to answer your question, learning to trust yourself and your gut. And then I'm sort of a mesovert. I'm not an introvert. I'm not an extrovert. For me, really learning to embrace new relationships. I have met so many wonderful people, but at the same time, it's uncomfortable for me in a natural way. And I am just so thankful for the relationships I've developed, including this one right here, Adrian. It's so nice to meet you. I've met some incredible people, but I've had to get comfortable being incredibly uncomfortable in forging all of these relationships, as well as owning that I didn't really nurture my network for like 8 years. So reaching back out, restoring relationships, difficult, but really worth it. So that's kind of my 2 cents on the harder parts of the decision.
And right back at you. I'm so glad we met.
Me
We,
too.
we have connected, and also excited about meeting you in person in less than two
Yeah,
weeks.
yeah.
So you mentioned the network and the support system. Share with us, please, how did your network support you in this moment of transitioning, in those moments? What kind of role did your network play?
So I would say, first and foremost, my closest relationships really supported me. And like you were saying earlier, people believed in you before you believed in yourself. That really became apparent to me in this process. And having the courage and vulnerability to have difficult conversations about your insecurities, about your fears. And then I think even working on that foundation of trust of yourself, right, through those close relationships. And then I would say the next phase is that closer relationship I have out in multifamily. I can't thank my former boss, Stacy Manus, enough. I've worked for her twice in my career. I get emotional. She's been there in my life in such an impactful way. She's been way more than a boss, but she's believed in me well before I did. And so she's someone I can call as a lifeline if I'm having a bad day. And then even expanding that network into these newer relationships. I've met so many amazing entrepreneurs, all going through the same things that I am, who may be 2 or 3 years ahead of me in their process, that have given me amazing advice to bet on myself. I can think of Stacy Hobson, or I'm sorry, Suzanne Hobson, Stacy Hampton, Stacy Manis, lots of Stacys, Naomi Marquez, Cecilia Cosio. Like there's so many people, Jennifer Carter at the Multifamily Media Network. They've all bet on themselves and had conversations with me at just the right time that really made me say, just keep moving forward. Keep it a day at a time. You got this. You can do this. It's been really impactful. I can't say how much. It's immeasurable.
You mentioned kind of like having to reactivate your network after a 8 year gap. Looking back, would have been maybe smoother transition for you to just kind of keep that active throughout the 8 years?
Yes. Yeah, I would
Uh,
say, you know, sometimes if you're at a large company, and there's nothing wrong with this, you're at a large company, you're in that ecosystem of that large company, you're working hard, you've got your great clients, and I've met some amazing clients there too, but there's some relationships you let go of, not even intentionally. I had a conversation yesterday with someone I hadn't talked to in like 5 years. And we're like, why haven't we talked in 5 years? Like, I miss you. So I would say you're spot on, Adrian. Nurture those relationships, carve out time intentionally, and keep in contact. Life goes fast. It really goes fast. And they're good people. So you don't want to lose that contact.
I also ask this in context of seeing some amazing talent out there individuals that were at the top of their career, really, senior vice presidents, senior directors that have an event happening in their life. I'll say typically is different than yours, right? Like they're not stepping out by choice. They just wake up one day and there's no job for them.
A
After
lot
some
of
point,
that.
yeah, I'm seeing it like I'm literally it's just like watching a movie when I see it on LinkedIn, and there are a lot of people I just know personally that have dedicated their career, most of their careers, decades sometimes, to particular institutions, and then one day that institution says we don't have a place for you, and then the next thing that I see is I see them like starting then to build, I think, their brand online, to reach back out, to start networking. And I'm thinking if this was always like the case for them, allocate a little time to like keep that network warm and expanding it, how much easier of a transition would have been for them. I
Hmm.
bet it's really devastating, right? Especially when it's not by choice like you did. And I actually talked to them in person, and it's really tough at the beginning.
There's a lot of that, and it's two conversations come to mind. Jay Stoltz actually had a post about the wisdom that's available in the industry right now that is not being leveraged, and the cost that's going to, that impact that it's going to have as a cost, a short-sighted cost of not leveraging that deep expertise. I think a lot of people were blindsided this last year. I think it's a perfect storm. And I have a lot of conversations around that. It's a heavy percentage amongst Gen X in particular right now. I think carving a path forward is difficult, but there's a lot of value that these individuals have. And I do think there's a lot of room and plenty of opportunity with the value that they have. It just may be outside of a corporate job. It may be more on the consulting side, but you're still spot on.
I love that you're saying this, and I want to do a quick follow up and ask you: do you think that companies in general, whether they're property management operators or on a supplier side, are they more open to hire consultants today than they were a year, 3 years, 5 years ago? Especially those that have like an impressive background, that don't necessarily want to go to a full time gig. What's your feel of the market? How do you feel about this? Do you think that they're more open than before? Is it still hard to like make a case for a consultant versus a full-time gig?
I would say it's a mixed bag, and two things. If you can solve a problem, if you go to a potential client and you're like, I see you have this problem. Here's how you've been trying to solve it. Here's how I can solve it with you, and you focus on an outcome with them from the beginning, and that you're aware of what their problem is, this insurmountable problem. I think that's the foot in the door. You have to start with their pain, and you have to be equipped to solve it. And I think the engagement needs to have strict goals to it. And then I think there's more openness to it. I think if you come in, like I have a menu of offerings, I never use it. I try to have a conversation and say, what I hear you saying is you have these four problems. Which one do you want to tackle first? I think you should tackle this one first. This is what I see. Here's how you've been trying to solve that problem. Let's have a plan. Let's have a focused engagement, and let's work on solving that problem. Then I think there's room. That deep expertise in the industry is going to be severely needed, especially as artificial intelligence gets rolled out. It needs validation. It needs to get hammered on. And people who don't have that deep expertise can't solve those problems with artificial intelligence. That's one opportunity that I see. I do think some places are still really short-sighted, and I think it's costing them a lot right now. I think we're in the perfect storm of cost creep, NOI compression, talent shortages, talent retention problems, and then also trying to blend in all of these new technologies. There's need for deep expertise in the industry, and companies who recognize that are going to win.
What would you say is the lowest hanging fruit when it comes to those challenges that you mentioned? What would be kind of like the hottest of all, in your opinion, that would be like the easiest to solve for someone that has their expertise, of course?
Yeah, I think first things first, if you have a portfolio of properties and you've got struggling properties, you have to have a hot list focus group and get really targeted around solving those low-hanging fruit properties first and foremost. Second, I think you need to look at your talent attraction and retention strategies. If you're not making that a priority as a portfolio company that manages properties, you're bleeding. Everybody's chasing the next, couple grand or $5,000 at the next company. It's a revolving door. You're not solving anything. So I think that's the next low hanging fruit. Switch to a performance based model, align with your ownership outcomes on those properties, incentivize people to stay with results. And I think that's a really good low hanging fruit strategy. And then I think prop tech stack simplification. There's a lot of trends right now in low hanging fruit around automation, taking out those low value manual tasks, freeing up time for service, simplifying the experience for regional property managers. Huge low hanging fruit. One example, when I was at Alliance Residential as a senior regional back 10 years ago, I had 10 instances of Yardi, all with separate logins at the time, different budget systems, different owner expectations. It's a perfect storm to lose really good people. And it's nobody's fault at the time. Things have already evolved a lot since then. It's just how it was then, right? So, what is the next step now with where we're at now to make it an even better experience for those people to attract, to retain, to grow? Those are my 2 cents at the moment.
So many questions to ask here. I'm going to start with one, right? And that would be, in your opinion, do you think that the big players like the Yardi and the Real Pages of the world, property management systems, because they're way more than just that,
Oh, yeah,
typically,
very
right?
robust. Mhm.
Just looking at them as property management operating systems, do you think they're gonna stand up and they're gonna stand the test of time, especially in the advent of AI, artificial intelligence? What would it look like operating properties from a technology standpoint in maybe 3 to 5 years? Would it be the same as now? Would the one stop, the big one stop shops and like, a few other players, would that even be like a business model? Or would it be just like totally had to be redone considering AI?
That's a great question. And I think there's, you've got Yardi, you've got Entrata, you've got RealPage. MRI's just done a big investment into their platform and kind of reimagining it. We are an end-to-end business, which I think is ripe with opportunities for a lot of software needs and a lot of problems to solve. I know all of the companies, Appfolio, Resman, all of these different companies are really trying to imagine the future. I think they're all investing in the future. You'll see, and all of this is public information. They're investing in artificial intelligence, they're investing in automation, they're trying to simplify. I think the difficulty comes, and I think time will tell, is long-term agility of all of the bigger players. How are they going to stay agile and evolve? And that can come through acquisition strategies, that can come through development strategies. I hear and see through all of the platforms that they're all working on simplification, right? Because it has gotten complicated. How do you simplify the platform? So, big themes around resident experience and on site staff experience improvement. So, I think they will. I think they'll all keep investing in what the future looks like. I can't imagine that they wouldn't. What I continue to watch for is, who are the agile players and who are the disruptive players. Like I love watching Ven City right now and Domos with their automation. Small players working on really taking platforms and automating manual tasks. To me, that's the future. How do you change a day in the life of a property manager? How do you change a day in the life of a resident or a leasing consultant or a maintenance technician? And I think those are really where it's going to win, reimagining what work looks like. Can your maintenance tech complete a service request while he's repairing it by talking to his phone in the future, right? Can a leasing consultant update their CRM system by talking to it after a tour without having to go sit down at a desk? I think there's a lot of things coming down the pike. I could talk about this for hours.
We'll have to reschedule a part two. We don't have a 60 minute,
Totally, totally. It's a good conversation.
and just keep going at it until we don't. You mentioned our friends from our multifamily media network, you also have a podcast out there on their platform. It's
I do.
host. So tell me a little bit about the story behind how you became a podcast host. How did you end up joining their network and everything?
So I was introduced to Paul Marks, who's one of the founders of the Multifamily Media Network, and he asked me to be a guest on his podcast. And I said yes, and I was very nervous about it. And went on his podcast, and afterwards they called me up and they're like, "Listen, we think there's something there. We'd like you to do a PropTech podcast. Would you be interested?" And I at first was like, "Oh no, I don't know if I can do that." Getting back to that mesovert nature that I have, reluctant socializer, and so I ended up saying yes. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. Do things that make you scared and excited, and launched that. I think I just recorded episode 14, so it's still new, but really working with different prop tech founders and people in prop tech or even in the multifamily side that have prop tech insights to have really important and critical conversations about where prop tech is headed. What do we see the future of work in multifamily, and how prop tech will affect that in the next 5 years? So I'm honored to be part of their network, and feel really thankful that they asked me to join.
Well, congratulations. Welcome to the
Yeah,
podcast host world.
yeah,
Well,
totally.
I heard a statistic. 90% of the podcasts don't go past episode 4.
Uh,
So if you're on your fifth episode, you're gonna be top percent, 10%. So that's kind of low barrier when you think about it, because it takes consistency, and
it does.
it takes a lot. But you had to start from somewhere, right? You're not gonna get to 100 episodes until you get to the 10th, the 20th, the 30th, the 31. The most important is the first, right?
Oh,
You
totally.
just,
Got to do it.
to
Take a
just
risk.
get started. So I'm super curious, right, from what you're doing and from conversations with your guests. What are some super hot trends on a tech side currently in multifamily?
There is a company that is disrupting the budgeting process. To me, as someone who spent 20 years missing her birthday, my birthday is 9/11. I would always be deep in budget process, whatever role I was in on my birthday, and never get to celebrate it. Um, Visibly is actually, they say tip to tail budgeting process is 10 hours for a property now with their platform. Super disruptive. Efficiency, time savings, and begin with the end in mind. That to me is amazing. And then I also think about artificial intelligence and language learning models like Hio, Jen Finn's company. She actually is disrupting the on demand help model and the on demand advice model, where you get all of your policies, procedures, lease agreements, everything put into this learning model. And then any of your teams, corporate or on site, can text a phone number and get real time answers to any policy, procedure, or lease agreement item in your company. So if you're a leasing consultant on a Saturday, and you're new and someone comes in to break their lease and you don't know, you text the number, it gives you the proper script and answers to use with your residents, and even goes back to tell you where to do it. If it can't help you, it actually will log a ticket for you into the system. And she said that it reduces help desk tickets by like 45%. It's transformative. So I love that theme. And then I think, really more than return on investment in artificial intelligence. That's what I keep hearing. It's like ROI is one thing, which I think the industry is still having a hard time measuring effectively. So I think we got to get really clear about measuring the impact and ROI of our artificial intelligence solutions. And then really having a framework around measuring success and efficiency in artificial intelligence.
Do you think the disruption could come from within the industry, generally speaking, or does it have to be an exterior force that actually shakes the industry?
I would like to think it can come from inside. I think everybody knows the problems, but I think sometimes you get people from outside the industry that know how to ask the right questions about your problems, so that you can be like, okay, we've accepted a certain amount of discomfort with X. Like, for example, my client right now is disrupting risk transformation, and they can actually help you reduce your bad debt exposure through their solutions. We all in the industry are like, 50 basis points of bad debt, it's great, right? That's just fine. That's a certain level of tolerance on a problem that exists. It takes someone from outside the industry to go, okay, we're going to look at this differently and we're going to tackle this problem. So I think you need both, because you got to have that inside knowledge and that inside information. But maybe in our industry, we've got a certain level of comfort with something that could go away or be solved.
What areas of property management in general are the areas where you provide expertise? Your firm provides expertise.
So I've been fortunate in my career to work in everything from leasing through operations management to leadership and marketing, as well as then pivot into customer success and strategic accounts. I think that gives me a really unique lens to look at an organization and ask them about their biggest problems and then work on solving them. So it can be an operations problem, it can be a technology problem, it can be a prop tech go to market strategy, or it can be a marketing problem. I can look at your organization, look at your problems, and come up with a plan to tackle that. I have, yeah, I'll say my Strength Finders report says I have a strategic mind as my number one strength. So I tend to look at where the problems are, and then my mind plays chess and comes up with a plan. So I like to help organizations solve problems and can focus on those key pillar areas and helping them solve those problems. Hot list focus groups, performance planning, maybe it's repositioning, maybe it's help with rolling out or consolidating your prop tech stack or looking at automation. But right now, my client's actually a prop tech client that's actually going live in the market right now, and I'm having a lot of fun with them.
When it comes to picking prop tech for operators, I'm speaking on behalf of operators. I think it could be a very cumbersome, a very challenging. And I go back a little bit during COVID's time when we had to take in-person interactions off the table, and then typically they were replaced by technology. So there was a
Yeah,
lot of technology that was created during those times fast.
yeah,
Companies have adopted those technologies fast because they had to keep running, keep the shop
yeah.
open. And here we are in 2025, where there's different times when we're back to in person. There's back being a choice, and then we have a huge stack of technology that we're looking at. So how do we vet current technology, and how do we vet something that's not current? How do we vet if we're gonna bring a piece of technology in? I think that's a struggle from what I'm talking to many operators. That's a struggle that I'm like seeing. It's obvious struggle. What would you say to that?
So first things first, I think we've done a good job in the industry of putting band-aids on things, right? I have to solve this leak here, so I'm going to put a band-aid in it. Recently, I've been actually posting on frameworks for prop tech evaluation, shameless plug, but you really need to look at your goals and your outcomes as a leadership organization, and then you need to talk to your site teams. And I think first things first, you've got to get feedback about the current state of your organization. And too many times, we're not talking to the people using the platforms day to day. We think, oh, we like this financial report, or oh, we like this over here. Those are your decision maker likes. But your non decision maker needs are a very different experience. And you have to talk to your site teams. You have to. So I'd say first things first, find out where all the pain is in your organization and get a really clear head about where those problems are. And then go out and evaluate. And I'm happy to share my framework of evaluating your prop tech solutions. No strings attached, but you have to evaluate it and really look at what's working. And then do you want to put a band-aid on it, or do you want to actually have transformation? And then two big evaluators: is it solving a problem, and is it creating simplification? And if you can't answer yes to both of those, just don't do it yet. I think about self-guided tours back during COVID. Really weren't market ready at the time. They're market ready now, but you have to make sure these products and solutions that you're comfortable with where they're at in their readiness state. If it's super innovative, you might have to be comfortable being that alpha beta tester and being innovative in that. If you're not, as a company and an organization, then you really need to evaluate and review its readiness for your state of the organization as well.
What you just said is so much music to my ears because because I'm seeing a lot of very intelligent individuals creating technology, trying to solve problems that they see in an industry. They're not from the industry, they're from outside, but they're thinking we could build this. They're very
Yes.
tech inclined, they're writing code, they're hiring developers, and everything's going super well. And then they hire like a bunch of salespeople to sell the product. But then I'm not seeing typically, I'm not seeing in that process, I'm not seeing the end user being represented, having a voice. By having a voice, I mean like actually have employees that have end user experience, that I could get their hands on that piece of tech and
Yeah.
tell them, like, this is not how this is gonna work. Like, your flow is wrong.
Yeah.
It's not how we do it at the site level or wherever, right?
You're so spot on.
Where we worked. So the process continues with salespeople leveraging their relationships. They go in front of decision makers. Like you said, they're not the end users. They're just the ones that are making the decision. They're looking at the report or a piece of tech and are saying, this looks so wonderful. It'll be so great to have it. It's like the shiny toy. And they sign a contract, and then everything's being pushed down to the site teams with no buy-in, with no feedback. It's just that we're going to do this going forward. What it ends up happening not too long down the road is very low adoption rates. People actually hating their life, because this is not a isolated occurrence. It happens over and over and over and over again. So you end up, instead like helping your site teams, you end up punishing them with technology,
You do. That's punishing. That is so well said, Adrian. I love that statement.
because
Well said.
it's true. It's like a punishment. You're not actually providing them with tools to be successful, to
Yeah.
succeed. I heard a report. This was a post on LinkedIn about 3 months ago, I want to say, or four. And I think the report was saying that there was some research done at the site level. And then leasing agents are basically stating that close to 70% of their time is being spent trying to help residents and prospects navigating to the tech that's supposed to help them.
Yeah. No. Oh,
And as soon as I heard that, I said, right at this moment when I'm reading this post, there's someone out there creating a AI, an artificial intelligent, I'll say, avatar,
yeah.
that's going to solve those problems without any type of touch from the leasing agents. Is going to be like your problem solving body for the leasing agent. So
Yeah.
two things are going to happen. First of all, obviously, leasing agents will actually have time to sell what they were hired for. Secondly, the technology that gives the most headache is going to be scrutinized, is going to come to surface, and property management companies will end up asking the question, is it really worth it for us to keep a piece of technology that we're actually the technical support for it, we actually have to pay, like, invest in the technical support for it, because it's not self-sustainable, we're like frictionless enough, or do we just have to remove it altogether and find out how we could do without it?
Strip it away and then see what opportunities exist. Yeah, it's funny. There's a couple things that come to mind. I know of property management companies now that actually have a committee that includes site teams in that committee to evaluate PropTech solutions. I think that's really smart. And then, back to simplification, can you even imagine as a leasing specialist spending 70% of your time on low value items like that? To me, that's ripe for problem solving in the industry, freeing up that time for that high value service and serving residents and prospects. That's enormous. I love that.
Shelley, we're about to come to a close of this amazing conversation. I'd like to get some final thoughts from you.
Okay. I think this year is going to be a better year in multifamily in many markets. And if you are having problems in a down market, it's going to get better. But I would say in a down market is when you see all of your opportunities so that your good market actually becomes better. So look at your problems and make a list, those top problems, and then get an action plan together for the year of how you're going to solve them. And if I can be of help, I'm here.
I love it. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an amazing
Oh,
conversation. I truly enjoyed it.
oh, I really like talking to you, Adrian. I look forward to many more to come, and I'll look forward to seeing you at NMHC.
Likewise. And everybody, thank you for watching us today. It's been amazing having you along. Until next time, take care. Have an amazing day.